Is Love's I think it's a great opener for the album. I think it really sets the tone actually, because it's quite a big rock song, and I think there are quite a few songs like that on the record.
I think it's a really good opening for the album because it's probably one of the most different sounding tracks on the record, certainly from anything we did on the first album.
It was one of the earlier songs we wrote. Me and Charles started to write when we were at my house, and the opening sound that you hear was something that I think informed the songwriting. It was the first thing we used to sort of structure the song rhythmically and to ground it a little bit.
Probably one of my top two of the new songs to play live so far. Really enjoying playing that song live. It feels like the kind of song which is going to do well when we take it on the road. And sometimes in the studio you kind of have those moments where you're recording it and you just get to a place with some songs and you just know that they'll be good songs, specifically things like festivals. And I think Strangers will be definitely a really good song for our live shows. It's really upbeat, it's quite anthemic. It's a song which is probably going to be a single at some point, I think, and it's a really strong track. Bigger Than Us was a song that as soon as even early demos of it were put together, I think we all knew it would be a track which would be a single. I think it's probably our song with the biggest potential to do well commercially that we've ever written. The way that it was going with that song, we didn't really want to hold back with it at all when we were in the studio. It felt like it was building so much that it would be silly not to follow that natural rhythm that we had when we were making it.
That was the first song during the writing process that we really wanted to hone in and try and make something very catchy, very pop in a way. It's quite conventional compared to a lot of the songs on this album in the structure.
It's definitely another one of the songs which I think will connect with people when we play it live. It's an anthem, I think.
It was a real challenge. We didn't really allow ourselves to experiment too much with that song. We said we want to keep this simple, make it really to the point and direct, but with a melody that's better than anything we've written before.
One of the songs which has the most clear influence of working with Alan Moulder on it. It's got really aggressive guitars.
We were keen to have it sounding quite industrial. There was a lot of really interesting sampling and triggers, using very odd percussion and triggering that to real drums and electronic drums. And that's where Alan Moulder, the producer, really came into his own, I think, because he just loved it from the first time he heard the riff, the opening riff, and he was very excited about that one, I think. And we took what we heard that he'd done in 9 Inch Nails records before and, tried to do that in our own way.
A lot of people have already picked up on that song as being the most gritty or most aggressive thing that we've ever written, and I completely agree with that.
It's got his slightly signature My Bloody Valentine style guitars on it, and it just sort of shakes the floor really when it's played really loud.
Well, Bad Love. Bad Love's a tough one for me because while we were making the record, I really actually didn't like it at all. I sort of hated it. I didn't like the tempo of it. I didn't like how simple I felt it was in every sense. But actually, now that we started playing it live and I've had a bit of time away from the recording process and a bit of time away actually from listening to the songs, I really like Bad Love. I think it's a very powerful rock song, and sort of. Our manager pointed this out today. It's sort of very much has quite a classic rock song feel about it as well. I think it leans quite heavily towards something maybe like Led Zeppelin or something, which I wouldn't say was a direct influence on our band, especially not on this record. But I like that it has that feel to it, and I hope that it reminds other people of that, because it's nice to hear reference points like that in music.
We started playing this Alicia Keys album in the studio, and everyone who hadn't heard it before was slightly taken aback at first as to why we were playing something of that genre. but the more we listened to it and sort of dissected it, the more impressed we became by it. And even though Bad Love is certainly not an R&B track, it's got elements of that sort of half-time drum beat, which I suppose is quite Led Zeppelin as well. But the chords and some of the rhythms and the piano hooks and things are, I would say, a little out of place on a normal White Lotus track. But I think it's an interesting one. I'm still to make my mind up fully about it, if it's a success or not. But it's definitely interesting.
The most unconventional of all of the songs on the record in terms of White Lies, because it takes a completely different step. You know, I think this album is really varied in style, because there's aggressive songs, there's big anthems, and then there's this one which is like, I think, more pop based than anything we've done before. I think it probably bears more Talking Heads influence than anything we've done before, and that's, I think, interesting, because they're a band that we grew up loving.
I think it's much more of a slow burner on the album. It's not quite so immediate, and I think that's something that a lot of people have picked up on. I think if you listen to it as a whole song, I think it really immerses you.
I really love this song. I think it's very simple in the music and the way it's written. I think the main theme, the main riff that's played is actually on bass, so I suppose I particularly enjoy that.
Peace and Quiet, I think, I think we've mentioned quite a lot with interviews related to our second album that but especially Charles and Jack, I think, listened a lot to the band Talk Talk, especially their later records, and I think you can hear that influence in Peace and Quiet. I think there's an essence of that freedom and that sort of slightly improvised parts and I think strong musicianship. I think also, more than any other track, it shows how much we've learned over the last couple of years touring the first record and playing together and playing our instruments.
It's a song about various things that I experienced when I went travelling to Tibet in January. I suppose it deals with a few religious practices that I saw out there, which are slightly, well, definitely were alien to me, and I found myself thinking about, the reasoning behind them and how foreign it is to see something like that, even coming from from London, where so many different religions are in your face all the time. There's still nothing quite like that.
Come Down's a weird one, because this is a song. It's funny because we've been listening to the record and working on it for the last few months, but then for the last 2 months previous directly to this time, we've been learning the songs to play live, and this is a song which we aren't going to play live, I don't think. Certainly not in the near future. It features certain vocal techniques which can't be replicated without replicating Harry, and the technology isn't there for that yet.
It was fun to write that one because we gave ourselves a lot of space to do whatever we wanted, but again, I think there's no guitar in it, there's no bass guitar certainly, and it's just very atmospheric.
It's quite far from sonically from anything we've done before, and I think that will come as a surprise.
I had a lot of experiences over the last 2 years that I felt were worth writing about.
We were sort of veering towards doing what a lot of bands do on their second album and trying to make something really different and experimental.
And I think you can hear that on the album. I think every song is very different from the last one.
And I think also we made a very conscious decision, Charles and myself, to immediately share all of the music we wrote, even if we'd been working on it for like a couple of hours in a day. We'd just email it out straight away to everyone, you know, management, the label, Jack obviously, and then Alan and Max, the people who worked on the record. And I think that meant that it just immediately became like a team project, especially between the band and the producers, and we could start to visualize where it was going to go straight away.
And we spent 5 weeks writing, and then it was and it just went really well.
I think is really a great moment for us, because it should, I think, maybe confuse a few people, maybe hopefully shock a few people.
I certainly remember thinking, you know, how do you write a song? I don't remember how we wrote songs, but it just happened very quickly. And then we went in to record it with Alan Moulder in London, and then 6 weeks later came out and it was done.
I mean, the best thing about working with Alan was that we already knew that he's a White Lies fan, because he mixed the first album for us, and then as soon as we started thinking about producers for this new record, I mean, he was top of our list. And one of the most important things about working with a producer is the relationship you have with them, and being able to feel very comfortable with them. And because we'd worked with Alan before, because we'd met him, knew him, we knew that we got on, and we knew that there would be no kind of social problems to overcome first, because as soon as you can relax in the studio and start enjoying it, that's when you become really productive, and you know, all of a sudden you don't mind staying till 1 or 2 in the morning every night, because you're having a lot of fun. And it's not, I mean, you're always going to have a couple of days where you're feeling a bit stressed out or a bit wound up, but with Alan it was actually really a good collaboration, and he pushed us in all the right ways, I think.